Hello, and welcome to Revolutionize Your Relationship. I am your host, Eva Blake. And in this series, I'm talking to a variety of experts who are uniquely qualified to educate and empower you to master mind and body intimacy, to unleash your passion, and to create everything that you desire in life and love, because you are worth it. So I'm excited to talk today to Jenna Bishop. So welcome, Jenna.
Hi, I'm so excited to be with you.
Yes, thank you. Jenna is a licensed clinical social worker and certified faith-based therapist located in Plano, Texas. Her practice specializes in helping refocus the therapeutic process back to the issues that women struggle with on a daily basis, things like comparison, perfectionism, vulnerability, and shame. And Jenna offers counseling for relational issues, anxiety, trauma, and overall health and wellness. A wife to Ben and a mama to 3-year-old Ellen, Jenna is a recovering perfectionist, a trauma survivor, a highly sensitive person, an obsessive reader, and an advocate for women living life unashamed and in love with who they are. So
That's
welcome
so true.
again.
Such a mouthful about me, but I love it. And it's all so true. I'm very passionate about what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Let's just jump right in because I want to start with something that maybe doesn't get talked about enough in the space of relationships, and that is expectations, especially all the stuff in expectations that go unsaid, especially in the bedroom and with sex. So what are some of the most common sex expectations that you hear about sex from the women that you work with, which you've experienced in your own life? And how do we get out of that?
Yes. Well, how long do we have today?
Yeah.
So, obviously, I hear a lot in my work. One of the main things that I've really identified is that we all have a dialogue that we keep on a daily basis related to what we think our partner wants from us. And that's one of the biggest things I hear from women is instead of assessing what do I want, it starts with how do I meet my partner's needs. And I think that we see ourselves sometimes through the context of our relationships. And I think part of reclaiming our sexuality is by stopping that particular lens and realizing that we exist in our own empowerment and that we can stop. I'm going to talk about like boundaries and stuff as we go through this. And I usually refer to boundaries like as a hula hoop because I just think it's a really beautiful imagery. But I think a lot of the time as women, we spend time in somebody else's hula hoop trying to figure out what they need. And really we need to stay in our hula hoop if we're really going to find sexual satisfaction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are some of these specific sex expectations, right? I mean, there's a long list. One of the big ones that comes up in my life, not any recently now, but like it did certainly in my 20s and early 30s before I was like, where I am now, right? Like more empowered in my sex life. But a lot of it was around like, sex had to involve penetration, for example.
Yes, I love that you bring that up. I'm so passionate about the fact that that is not true. I love that. So I actually have a lot of mamas, right? And a lot of what ends up happening after you've had baby and breastfed and your body's been through so much and all these traumas, and even though they're good and they're natural, it's still trauma to the body, right?
Yeah.
And so when they're on the other side of that, how the vagina feels, if it's dry, how the breasts feel, whether or not they want certain things to be touched. Like there's so much adjustment to that. And I think that women give themselves very little permission to change during that chapter of life. And it doesn't even mean it's going to be the new normal forever, but it does mean that you're honoring where your body is. And so what I tell my women a lot of the time is, hey, listen, if you're getting the recoil effect, which the recoil effect is your partner tries to touch you, right? And you're like, ooh, please stop touching me, that kind of thing. Because the assumption is if you are trying to touch me, you are trying to penetrate me. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I love that you brought that up. And so for women, a lot of the time what I say is, if your partner wants to touch you, as long as they're not objectifying you or touching you in a way that you don't like, take a second to see where you are, turn around, hug your partner, enjoy that oxytocin that you get from that connection, and then pause for a second and ask yourself, what am I available for? Don't
Yeah.
just assume what your availabilities are in that moment because of how your body is feeling.
The question, what am I available for, is, I think it's revolutionary actually for a lot of people because, as you said, many of us have been trained, whether it's this question about like, isn't it innate in us, or have we been socialized to focus out on other people? And again, that also is a trauma response, right? If we grew up in a very, a traumatic or dangerous household, you had to be on the lookout for what else was going on in the environment. So that just that training of what's happening out there, it's, what actually am I available for, is, turns all of that previous training up on its head.
It definitely does. And the other thing as well is each person's personality is a little bit different. And for some reason, we're given so much permission to have different personalities, but we're not given permission to have different sex personalities. And yet,
Uh-huh.
sex is the most intimate act
Yeah.
that we have that we can express between two people. And it's like, shouldn't we be talking about what our sex personality
Yeah.
is?
Go into that a little deeper. What do you mean by sex personality?
Yeah. So part of it is how do we present in the bedroom, right? What need are we looking to have met? What feels safe and unsafe for us? Are we the type of human being that needs our eyes closed or open? Do we need music? Do we need it to be quiet? Do we get overstimulated by certain touches? Are we a communicative person? Are we not? There's all these different things that go into it. And yet, when people come in with already rigid expectations, it gives very little permission to explore that, which I think is
Yeah.
part of the reason why so little contentment exists sometimes for people in the sexual realm.
Yeah.
And if both people can come to the bedroom together and say, hey, I'm here to learn, just like dating, more about your sexual personality, right?
Yeah.
Then there's less pressure on it, and you feel like you can be the expert of your own body. And that's what makes sexuality safer.
Even the questions that you ask, there really are, am I the person who this or does this? Like, that may only exist for today, because tomorrow it may be completely different. So today I may be like, I don't want to tell you what I want. I really just want you to know what I want. And tomorrow I'm going to be like, this is exactly what I want. X, Y, Z. I'm
Yeah,
going to tell you.
100%. And as a perfectionist, highly sensitive person, right? That's gonna. I would say that goes more into the area of like a little bit like controlling, and I can own that about myself. But what I would say is, it's really important that if you know that you have certain sensitivities, that you feel like you can speak up.
Yeah.
For some reason, so oftentimes women don't feel like they can speak up. And so then they just avoid the bedroom altogether instead of saying, hey, normally I like nipple play, but today I don't want you anywhere near my breasts. And that's okay. And allowing whoever your partner is to not internalize where your boundary is for that day is
Yeah.
so unbelievably important in a female feeling comfortable to go back and meet you there.
So you made a comment in a previous conversation that we had, which went something like, I want to support people to just do whatever they want, and as long as it feels safe for all the parts of themselves. So can you just unpack, what does that mean when you say all the parts of themselves?
So it's interesting because a lot of the time when people don't necessarily have a trauma history and don't come to therapy to like deal with that trauma history, they don't always get the opportunity to talk to a therapist about the deeper parts of self that exist and how those flow in and out of one another. And so when I teach trauma therapy, I teach based on three separate parts. First part is the adult self.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that parents the two little kids that kind of exist inside of all of us as human beings that kind of continue forward with us. We've got our sort of not okay child or okay child. She's about 5, 6 years old. She just wants to be loved, accepted, affirmed for exactly who she is, right? And then we've got that like 15 or 16-year-old girl inside of us, right? She's rebel, she's exploratory, she wants to push those boundaries. Yeah, she wants to fight sometimes, she carries our anger, our protection. She's really, really valuable to us. And so oftentimes when I have trauma survivors, they try to peel themselves apart a little bit to be able to be in the bedroom and be present with their partner. And that's the piece that's always concerning to me as a counselor, is because if we're talking about the parenting of self, we shouldn't be leaving our inner children in a position where they feel devalued, unsafe,
Yeah.
unseen, where they don't feel like they can say stop.
Yeah.
Right? And so in my mind, each part of us wants to be a part of the play, but we need to be able to say, hey, I was available for this. I'm not available for it now. Or even be bold if it's your rebel and she's like, hey, this is something I really want to try. Could we kind of go there? But like, if I want to stop, can we stop?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how we expand our sexual appetite, play, interests, all of that.
And I would just add one of the really common expectations that I've heard over the decade that I've been doing this work is that if we have to talk about it, then something's not right about it.
Yes. Good, Eva.
So but yet the only way we could get to what you just said, right, is if we're having a conversation. The only way that I could get that my partner could understand that, like, I want to be risky, but I also might want to retreat at the exact same time, is if I bring it up, is if we have a space in our life that is not just safe, like the walls aren't going to come crashing down, but like it's generative, it's juicy, it's fun, even like not just it's safe to go in, but like I actually want to go to that place. It's enticing. That's the word I'm looking for, right? So, how do you support women to create that?
Yeah. Well, so I love what you say because again, whenever I'm talking about like kids and boundaries and that kind of thing, I always like to use that example, right, of like a playground. And it's been like studied and stuff that if you have a fence around a playground, right, like the kids will go up to it, they'll touch it, they'll lick it, like, they'll like put their hands through it, whatever, right? But if you have a playground that doesn't have that fence, right, they actually tend to stay a little bit closer in because they're not sure like where that level of safety is, right? And so again, if it starts with safety and that's like the foundation, like I feel safe with you as a human being. I believe that you're for me. I believe that you accept me for who I am. I believe that this is not an exchange of like power or money or whatever else it is that's there. It's an interchange between you and I, an energy shift between the two of us, right? And so at that point, as long as safety is there, and like you said, the communication is a part of it, like we can go anywhere we want.
Yeah.
Right? We can try anything because I know that if for some reason I'm not into it or I need something to change, then I can say it. But again, like you said, in dating, it's like it's totally normal to go out and have conversations and have intimate discussions. And then all of a sudden, people get quiet in the bedroom. And I'm like, this is where we need to have the bulk of communication happening.
Yeah. And so, what do you recommend for women who are in this position? Maybe, and we could think about like women across a variety of life experiences, like after the first or second or third child, right? In that space, the body is completely different. After an illness, the body is completely different. After 5 years of marriage, when you were just focusing on your career, or, like when you're in the first year, right? After that first year where, we get really, really excited and everything's fresh and new, but then something happens after that first year and all the hormones shift, right? And we go into a different phase. Like for wherever we are, how do we get from that place, into that enticing and onto the playground?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I want to say that interestingly, one of the roots to things changing in our sexual relationship is fear. Right? So we enter whatever that new chapter is, all those beautiful examples you just gave. And the fear is this is my new normal and it's never going to change. And that's an expectation again. So expectations are not just, okay, what do I have of somebody else? It's also, what do I have of myself? And how do I judge myself when I'm not available for what I used to be available for?
Yeah.
It's this nature within us that says, I want to have certainty over what's going on with me.
Yeah.
And because something just changed, I don't have the certainty, right? And so then I'm left with what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Why can't I do blank anymore? And so, as an answer to your question, I always first like to say we need to start with giving ourselves permission to be exploratory with our own selves,
Yeah.
right? To figure out, so, okay, what's changed about me? What do I like and not like now? And then how can I communicate that to my partner? That then reopens the sphere again, just in a different way at a different chapter. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I'll do is I'll have my women sit down and I'll say, okay, so like we're in the recoil effect. That's where we are right now. How do we want to work our way back to whatever place it is or to a new place? And so, a lot of the time, I have them think about, okay, what did I used to enjoy? What did I
Mm-hmm.
like about that? Making good connections from past, and then saying, okay, but what do I feel like I'm available for now? And so I may start them with, hey, listen, schedule it. I know people hate scheduling sometimes, but remember, you and I were having an initial conversation about all this, and I was like, Eva, the brain is the largest sex organ. Like, if you're not thinking about it, you can't get excited about it. You're not going to make
Yeah.
the space. So, if you're that person that has 3 kids at home, put it on the calendar and say,
Mm-hmm.
all our commitment it to do is to meet each other in that space and get naked and hold each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where we're going to start, right? Or maybe our first commitment is, hey, we haven't even held hands on the couch in months and, much less penetration. So maybe our first step is we hold hands on the couch. So it's back it up to a place that does feel safe and allow your body to know that you're only going to ask it to enter into areas with you that feel
Yeah.
okay. And then you can expand it to all the fun.
I'm so glad that you're also on the put it on the calendar train. I'm in that club as well. And, my position on this is to come to that time, dressed or not dressed, however it is, but hydrated, well fed,
That's right.
rested,
Yes.
excited. And then whatever happens after that is whatever happens after that. But like, you do your job to show up in a place where you are ready to engage at some level and you know what that is. And that's it. And then you get to play in that space. And I think that goes against, or it kind of unpacks some of that expectation, because I think there's a lot of expectation that's like, it's going to be this spontaneous thing. And like, I'm going to be able to touch you this way. And then you're going to have this reaction. And then we're going to just tear each other's clothes off. And like, that doesn't happen
Yes.
for a lot of people.
Let's say most people. I mean, and that's the thing. You bring it up. It's an interesting point, but it's like, okay, so where did my sex expectations come from? Did it come from media? Did it come from watching pornography? Did it come from conversations that I had with my parents when I was growing up? Did it come from my very first sexual experience? Like, what makes that up, and how do you almost like peel back some of those layers and say, okay, what of these expectations still serves me, and like what's
Mm-hmm.
no longer serving me, and like what do I want to leave behind? I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I'll be watching a television show, right? And like a guy will like throw a girl up against the wall, and within like 10 seconds she's orgasming. It's like, that's not real life.
Right.
Like, and if that's
Right. Right.
what you've seen and that's what you think is supposed to happen, you're going to internalize a woman's experience. If she doesn't orgasm after 10 seconds with you, throw her against a wall,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I totally agree with that, just as a whole. And I think so oftentimes people are scared to question what their expectations are because they wonder
Mm-hmm.
if there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And if I start going down that path, then will I discover there's something wrong with me? And it's like every single part of our life requires us to ask those deeper questions,
Mm-hmm.
including this. And so, if you want to live the fullest sexual life you can, you have to ask
Mm-hmm.
the harder
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be available to hear hard answers from your partner as well.
And I think what you're touching on too, this like, I'm afraid to ask the question, is actually based on an expectation or on
Yes.
a myth that if I unleash my passion, like as we're using this title, or if I
Yeah.
if I pursue sexuality as something that's fundamental or exciting or joyful in my life, and I'm pursuing it intentionally, then that will equal me being completely out of control. That will mean that I'm a sex
Yes.
maniac, I'm a sex addict, I'm
Beautiful.
a this,
Yes.
that, or the other. And then there's this pathology to it. Then there's this label that says now you're wrong or bad or something is on the
Right.
other side of it. So I think that asking these questions is really valuable, and also noticing that sometimes the question in and of itself like is laced with a myth that is about
Yes.
being bad, being wrong, being in the place of shame. So shut it down, repress it, get back in your box.
Yeah, yeah. Stay like this big. Well, and I love that you brought up the point of shame, right? Because part of like our inner dialogue, I call it the parent self, right? Like kind of what comes after us all day. It's like, hey, you did a great job, or hey, like you messed up there and you should have done it differently, right? I find that for most of my clients, like the critical parent is very large for sex. There's so
Yeah.
much shame housed in that space. And again, the critical parent exists with the intention of establishing safety for you, right? So it's like if your kid's about to walk into the street, you're not like, hey, maybe you shouldn't walk into the street. You're like, hey, don't walk in the street, right? It's intense and all of that. And so I think that if you've had a shame filled experience related to sex, which most of us have at some point, right? That critical voice pops in and you stop being able to freely enjoy that space together.
Yeah.
And you made a beautiful point, Eva, when you said, coming to the table with all of my needs cared for allows me to play.
Yeah.
Yes. And guess what? When you have kids, you're not going to want to go from them hanging all over you to like jumping straight into bed. Like that's confusing for the body. So like put it on the calendar and say, this is when we have space and time to do it. And these are the things that I need to align in that way. And then that way the critical parent part is less likely to pop up in there because of a trigger episode, because you've already prepared your body.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a mom with a child that maybe like 6 and under, who's just like, there's somebody on my body in my space 97 hours a day. I really cannot handle my partner asking to be on or near my body. Right. And so what a powerful experience that a lot of people are having, a lot of women are having, and may or may not be fully communicating that to their partner who did not just give birth, who is not breastfeeding, who is not having someone tug at their clothes day after day, minute after minute, as it is for most people.
Absolutely. Well, and I can speak to that too, because, Ellen is 3 and, I had a beautiful pregnancy with her, and honestly, for all intents and purposes, I had a relatively easy labor, though she got kind of caught, so I had to like work really hard for it. But I breastfed her for 2 years, and that was really sweet for us. But as soon as I stopped breastfeeding her, Eva, my hormones just went crazy. It was like the first time in my life. I've been through trauma. I'm in HSP, all this. It was the first time in my life that I actually felt like physically depressed, right? And so in that time, it's like I had to get creative with how I was going to like connect with my husband, because I still needed that. I'm super obsessed with my husband. So, that helps. But it's not always just, I want to meet him there for myself. I also want to meet him there for him, because that's how we can connect in a physical way, right? And so for a lot of women, she was all over me all day today until I came to talk to you, And I love that. And I want space for that. But I also believe that the foundation of any household is, how is the partnership, right? How are you doing with your communication, with your intimacy, with your date nights and all those kinds of things? And then how are you doing with your sex? And what are you running from in that? And what's contributing to you running from it?
Yeah, beautiful. Now, in our previous conversation, you talked about responsibility tanking desire. So I'd love for us to just unpack that a little bit, because I think about responsibility as, wow, there's so much that I get to do. And wow, then there are things that like I don't actually want to do.
I totally agree.
But I also don't have children. So I'd love for you to talk about that in terms of, what happens when we have this increasing list of things that are on our to-do list, or this increasing list of things that are in our awareness. And now that many of us in America, for sure, have been in some variation of lockdown or isolation or at home, working at home. I've never worked at home so much in my life.
I know. It's crazy.
How does that affect our sex life?
Yeah. So because the brain is the largest sex organ, as your responsibility goes up, inherently the number of like to-do lists and things in your head and things that you have to manage goes up, right? That's the reason why a lot of couples will make more time to have sex on the weekends, is because in general, like there's just not as much going through your brain, though for a lot of people with kids, there's still just as much to do on the weekend. And so again, that's part of what comes back to why it's so important sometimes to schedule it if you feel like there's no other way to meet each other there, because then there's a couple of things that go into it. Because again, one of the expectations that I hear a lot is that I'm going to speak specifically to male and female relationship just for this one, but men will say, well, my friend has sex 4 times a week. Well, that's what's normal for them, or this, that, the other. And they come in with these expectations, whether it's from a friend or again, media, pornography, things they're reading in a men's magazine, whatever it may be. And they're like, well, why aren't we having sex 4 times a week?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not saying take a number and like schedule it out on your calendar, because I think that's too much pressure, and pressure is part of what takes away fun. But what I am saying is, as a couple, I would encourage you to sit down and have a conversation and say, what seems like a healthy ratio, like 2 to 4 times a week, or 1 to 3 times a week, or once every 2 weeks. Like, I don't care what the ratio is, but come up with a ratio so that both of you have it top of mind, so that you're both watching it, so that you're both thinking about it, because that's part of what is so fun at the beginning stages of relationship when you're dating, is it's always top of mind. It's like, well, what's going to happen, and when is it going to happen, and how's it going to feel, and all those fun things. And so it's like, well, how can we bring it top of mind even if you've been married for several years and possibly have a family?
Yeah.
And so thinking through it that way kind of gives you that space for it. And again, like you said, if you're looking at the week and you're going, wow, I've got a really busy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And by the way, more people are at home. So if you want to do it in the middle of the day, I totally encourage it, do it, but it's like, oh, I could totally meet you after this call and this call. And, the kids are gone because they're at school. So like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's have sex. So I've got, 15, 30 minutes. Let's bang it out. And then let's go have some lunch. Why not?
Plenty of options, right? Plenty of options. I personally am in the Saturday morning at 9 a.m. category.
Okay.
Good for
you.
So, yeah, exactly. But I think that's what's really perfect about that, is that some people really are, the kids are at home. We've got this hour, like, let's take advantage of it. Right. And other of us are like, just, don't talk to me for this week, and I will see you on the weekend.
Yes.
And then we can have like 5 hours together and like make it luscious. And then that's the fill, right?
Yes.
That's
and
the fill.
No right or wrong to it. And I also, I still have no idea where I heard this. I think it was like back a long time ago, but I've always loved the term like potato sack sex, where it's just like, hey, sometimes you need to get in there and have the connection, but other times you want to stay and play and explore and those kinds of things. And there's nothing wrong to it. Again, if you can be fluid with your expectations and available to hear what your partner's available for, and you stop long enough in your hula hoop to say, what am I available for? I mean, that's just a recipe for success. When sex starts to really tank for people is when you're not being honest.
Yeah.
You have to be honest about who you are and what you like. Yeah. Now, there is one piece that is hard sometimes. If you're in a committed monogamous relationship that you would like to see through your lifetime, which is not everybody's story, and that's fine, there are things that you may have to grieve about some of the wishes that you have sexually.
Yeah, say more.
So throughout your life, you may hit every single thing that you're interested in with your partner. Maybe intimacy develops deeper and your partner's willing to try, and you may hit it all. But your partner, let's say, for instance, she's a trauma survivor, and part of her sexual abuse or something was a specific thing that you're interested in. That's probably going to be a no-go zone for her. That's probably not going to make her feel safe, and that may never change, and that's okay. Yeah. So what I always like to say is, you're not wrong to have the need. You're not wrong to have the desire. You don't have to feel shame about it, but it's not always your partner's responsibility to meet you in that space either. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of that mixture of both. And I do think that there is definitely some grief in that for a lot of people. I
think that it is valuable to let yourself feel the feelings. let yourself express it. I think that's the other valuable thing about seeing somebody in the professional arena as a therapist, as a coach, somebody that you can actually have that conversation with, so that you're not having that conversation with your partner, and then you can actually have the emotional experience. You can discharge it. You can talk about it. You can think about it from a different perspective. You can get feedback, right? And that you don't have to unpack all of that nuance with your partner, who may just be a big red stop sign, red light all the way on whatever that part of the conversation is. But seeking out a place where you can explore, even if it's just mentally, like, this is what I want, or this was my fantasy, and it's not going to work in this relationship.
And it's another form of, so as the adult parent self, I've identified that there is a need underneath the surface that exists. And I'm going to give myself permission for that need and tell myself I don't have to feel shame about it. Just because my partner isn't available for it doesn't mean that I have to carry shame for it. But I agree, talking it out and giving yourself the space for that, I think, is a really important part. And then the other piece as well is our partner, her needs could shift over time. It's not, I mean, the sexual abuse, it may be a never, but for other people, they may be like, yeah, I'm not interested in, anal play or something like that. And they're like, never. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, maybe they're willing to try it. Like, it could happen, but you still need to give yourself the opportunity to grieve things as you go, so that you can meet your partner from a place of honesty and not just holding on to this future. Well, I hope it happens then, like this too much, because that'll put pressure on both of you to like make that happen, instead of just coming to the bedroom available for what both of you can do.
I'm thinking of something that one of my coaches said to me, which is, expectation is premeditated resentment.
Oh, that's so good. I love it so much.
So if we are expecting something from someone else, or even from ourselves in a way, like, it just sets us up to resent the situation, ourselves, them, our life, etc. And so I really like what you said around, the antidote really is about honesty, right? If we're just honest, then we can actually pick up the pieces, if we actually lay the pieces all out.
100% agree. I think it's totally true. And let's be honest, like, if we really, really love somebody, we want to meet their needs. And so I think sometimes too, whether it's on the, either side, if we feel like we can't meet a need, we feel guilty, because it's like, I love you. Like, I want to meet your needs. And so that's the reason why, like you said so beautifully, sometimes it's good for you to go and process that with somebody else, so that your partner is not consistently reminded that what they're available for is something they haven't given you. Because again, in a personality, from a personality standpoint, right? Like I told you earlier, like, I'm perfectionistic. Like, Eva, I'm not going to be able, like, I'm type A. Like, I can't be somebody that like is not like driven and thinking about things and making lists and whatever. That's a part of who Jenna is. And part of loving Jenna is loving those parts of myself, right? And so I think in sex as well, we have to learn how to love our own sexual personality and our own availabilities. You have to love that part of you, or again, sex is not going to feel like a fun place to go.
Look, we could go on and on for, I'm sure, hours and days, and we would have volumes and volumes. So folks, come back for that at another time. We'll let you know when that happens.
Sure.
But for today, this is where we get to leave it. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you so very much. It was great to have this conversation with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You're such a joy.
Thank you. And everyone who is viewing, come back tomorrow, because there's something super fun and juicy for you then.